Thank you, Christine and Hope. Hope you pardon my voice this morning. I'm getting over a cold, so I'll be maybe a little quieter. I hope you can still hear me. So what are some of your memories of your teachers? How many fond ones do you have? And how many that were not so good? The words spoken to you by those in authority over you when you were young stay with you for a long time. It could have been a teacher, a Sunday school small group leader, a pastor. Those words may have led you to take a certain path in life, help to see your worth. Words stay with you a long time, even from people that you don't like. Words can make you spiral, keep you up at night, or you can still recall them from 50 years ago. When people you look up to have authority over you, parent you, use words to describe you, good or bad, those memories stay. We talk about blessing those around us, especially with our children. To say words of blessing speaks truth, love into their lives that will stay with them. Anyone who teaches has that power. We all have power in different ways. We are formed by language. Marva Dawn writes this in her book, Joy in Divine Wisdom. Our language is formed by TV, movies, social media. Our language, in turn, forms who we are and how we relate and what we choose and why we act as we do. Some children are formed by the distorted language of alcoholic parents. Some are formed by the silence of absent ones. Adults, too, continue to be formed by various languages of hate and greed, or consumerism and injustice. Listening to a sermon about 25 years ago or so by George Shillington, as he was our interim pastor at that time, stayed with me and encouraged me in regarding women leading in the church. And then words by a mentor more than 40 years ago encouraged me to go into ministry. Wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is a teacher who inspires and does not tear down, understands that their words hold power. The book of James is of particular importance to us as in the Anabaptist tradition. The Anabaptist movement began by radical reformers who understood discipleship to be integrated in between belief and actions. Menno Simon said, "True evangelical faith cannot lie sleeping, for it clothes the naked, it comforts the sorrowful, it gives the hungry food, and it shelters the destitute." We believe that our words matter and that because of our beliefs, actions must follow. Anabaptists and Mennonites insisted that faith and works could not be separated, even as they also believed salvation to be the gift of God and not by human effort. To be a Christian meant to follow Jesus in all of life, even unto death, to take up the cross and follow Jesus. The Sermon on the Mount encapsulated what discipleship should look like. And since James echoed many of Jesus' teaching in Matthew 5-7, Mennonites have regarded this letter highly over the years. Wisdom is a practice. James chapter 3 starts by warning those who teach on how we use our words. He then moves to speak more generally on this theme of taming the tongue, which he says is nearly an impossible task. As a young child, I had anger issues. I would fight with my siblings, upset easily, and lash out. I don't remember what I said in my moments of anger, but my younger brother and I would play a lot together, and I'm quite sure there were moments that I antagonized him, and we physically fought over them. Years later, we don't have unresolved issues between us anymore. Thankfully, we have both matured, and we appreciate and love each other. As I grew in my understanding of what a Christian meant as a child, I prayed that God would help me with my anger. Reading the Bible helped, and especially verses about anger. Slow to speak and quick to listen. In your anger, don't sin. Taming the tongue and the fruit of the Spirit, like peace and patience. It opened my eyes to where I needed to grow, and by God's grace, I did. This chapter in James can hit hard for those who like to speak without thinking it through first, who anger easily, and words come out that we regret later. We know what words can do when we are angry or frustrated. Maybe we aren't direct, but we may be passive-aggressive about it, and it comes out as sarcasm or guilt. And when we do hurt people's feelings with our words, and they respond that they were hurt by them, we diminish it. We rationalize it by telling them not to be so sensitive, or I was only joking. But were we? We are using words to hurt and not help or heal. Control the tongue, control the whole. Verse 10 says, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. Why is the tongue like this? N.T. Wright says that Jesus had pointed out that what comes out of the mouth is a sign of what is really there, deep in the heart. Matthew 12, verse 34 says, make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. James echoes this when he speaks of the fig tree bearing olives. It's just not like that. Fig trees don't bear olives. If someone is cursing people made in the image of God, then one has to question whether their heart has been properly cleansed by the Spirit of God. Cursing in this context could be seen as wishing something bad would happen to another person or spreading lies about them. Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome or harmful talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Peter Davids, in his commentary on James, says that Scripture abounds with curses. Curses were common because, like blessings, they not only vented emotion, but also really affected the person or things against which they were directed. James is looking for consistency in our lives as we follow Jesus, to be people of blessing, and not blessing and cursing. It's a high standard, but we should expect nothing less if the gospel is the message of salvation. We can't take bits and pieces of this message we want and leave the more challenging parts on the side. Loving and truthful speech is central to the life of discipleship. Wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is the person who holds their tongue. Whether you are a child, a student, an adult, a parent, grandparent, senior, you can speak words of blessing and understand that your words hold power. James 3 has two main sections. The first is about taming the tongue, and the second is about wisdom. Having argued first about the danger inherent in the tongue and the need for consistency in speech, James now moves behind the speech to the motives inspiring it. In verse 3, the question is asked, who is wise and understanding among you? This word pair, wise and understanding, is frequently used in the Old Testament, and it indicates a people living according to God's insight. Who is wise and understanding among you? As usual in the book of James, the answer that comes is simple and direct. Good works are the mark of one who possesses wisdom. In so many words, you will know wisdom by its fruit. Wisdom is a practice. James Boyce, a professor of New Testament in St. Paul, writes that the gifts of God have an immediate and very practical purpose. They intend and point to a fullness of life as seen in a love and care for neighbor. Spirituality is not a matter of escape from this world, but it is to be exercised and most visible in a healthy life of interaction with the day-to-day affairs of this world. The false wisdom that James talks about in verses 14 to 16 is self-centered and inward-looking, earthly, unspiritual, demonic. It shows itself in envy and selfish ambition. We live in a world where ambition is required. If you don't have ambition, you must be lazy. If money makes the world go around, ambition is the engine that turns it. In a lot of contexts, climbing the ladder is a way of life. Now, some kinds of ambitions are good, but the problem with most of our ambitions is that it is all about us. And when our ambitions are essentially selfish, we can adopt an approach that seeks out our welfare above others. When selfish interest dominates our ambitions, our principles go out the window. James was very concerned about this tendency. That's why he wrote to warn first-century Christians about the effects of selfish ambition on people and on the communities they belong to. He says whenever people are jealous or selfish, they cause trouble and do all sorts of cruel things. I'm not sure anybody could have said it better. Wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is someone who is kind, not selfish, understands that their words hold power. James 3:13 to 18 tackles two kinds of wisdom, God's and the world's. Do you remember the movie Wizard of Oz? Near the end of the movie, Dorothy and her friends have brought the broomstick to the wicked witch to the wizard and ask that he now grants their requests, as he promised. As the wizard stalls for time, Toto pulls back the curtain, revealing the magnificent wizard is nothing more than a man who had everybody fooled. James' description on wisdom pulls back the curtain on the world's wisdom and exposes it for what it really is. Wisdom of the day based on a consensus of people who convince everybody else that they are right. James calls such wisdom earthly, unspiritual, and of the devil. Verse 17 moves to the heart of this whole book, the key verse in the book of James. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. These qualities sound very much like those qualities Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, identifies as the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Let's read verse 17 together. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. This verse defines the wisdom from above, the wisdom of Christ, the wisdom of the Spirit. This is the central verse in the book of James. Let's look at it a bit more closely. The wisdom from above, that's what we want. That is what we need for our daily life, so we don't ruin ourselves or other people. The wisdom from above is associated with the Holy Spirit, who lives inside of us. The wisdom from above is associated with maturity, with understanding of what choices we are to make. Edward Marquardt is a pastor at Grace Lutheran Church, talks about this wisdom from above as seen in Scripture. He says that Kings David and Solomon had it. Only 2 of the 40 kings of the Old Testament had it. King David prayed for it all the time. The Bible said that a good leader needed wisdom to discern good from evil, to discern good decisions from selfish decisions. Jesus had it. The Bible tells us he was full of the Spirit and wisdom, and that he grew in the favor of God. Luke 2, verse 52 says, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor." People were amazed at Jesus and asked, where did he get all this wisdom? The first church leaders, like Stephen in Acts chapter 3, say this about Stephen: "Therefore, friends, select from among yourselves 7 men of good standing, full of the fruit and of wisdom, who we may appoint to this task." Which widows are they going to help? Which widows were they not going to help financially? Those first church leaders needed the wisdom from above to make delicate choices. Our church leadership here seeks wisdom from above as we navigate all that lies before us. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. Purity is first on this list of characteristics of a wise person. Purity means to be wholesome, good, transparent, authentic. Jesus is always concerned about the cleanliness of the heart. A person is wholly and sincerely committed to following God's moral directives. There are no crooked or unjust motives behind his or her holiness. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving. Peace-loving. That is the way Christ wants us to live, with gentleness. There should be a calmness, a kindness, a peacefulness to our way of living with ourselves and others. It refers not to an inner peace, but a community peace. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive. Considerate and submissive. That is not to insist on your own way, in marriage, at work, in your family, or with your friends. When negotiating with people whose value and belief system is very different than your own, there is a willingness to yield. Most of us have a willingness to take a stand, to draw a line, and tell people how it should be done. There should be a non-combative spirit, a teachable spirit, a person who will gladly be corrected or learn a new truth. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, full of forgiveness, full of compassion, full of kindness. Wise hearts are full of mercy, forgiving freely and letting go. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. Full of good fruits. Christians who are mature are bearing mature fruit. Just a short time ago, the fields and apple trees in our gardens were full and ready to be harvested. That is the way our lives should be, full and ready to be used to love God and neighbor. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial. Impartial. Favoritism is the opposite of impartiality. We heard about that a couple of weeks ago when Brad Wright spoke on chapter 2. Impartial is the willingness to discern fairly in complex matters and to treat each person with the same respect, regardless of status. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. Sincere. Nobody likes a phony, especially a religious phony, who pretends and acts religious but is really not. A hypocrite talks the good talk but does not walk the good walk. Sincerity reflects an attitude of humility. Together, these two terms, impartial and sincere, indicate people whose inner motives are sincere and their outward acts are consistent. You never wonder where they are coming from, for they are unbiased in that they act the same toward all people. Herb Kopp writes in his book on the study of James, "This is what James has been working toward from the opening of his letter and what he wants for the people of God. This is the heart cry for justice, strong faith, and good deeds. These 8 virtues describe all the qualities of a controlled tongue, a life rich in faith and deeds, a just life where rich and poor alike can live in respect and harmony, and a life which God is in the center of everything." Wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is someone who has found the right source of wisdom, a source which will renew their inner spirit so what lies deeply within the human heart will find positive expression in life. Verse 18 ends this chapter. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. We know that planting time always comes before the harvest, and whatever we sow, we will also reap. The idea of sowing and reaping is a well-worn metaphor in the Bible. Most of the sayings in the Proverbs work on this principle. This proverb points to goodness as the natural fruit of a peacemaker's life. And that is James' point. Peacemaking, not striving for the truth, leads to righteousness. Sow in peace simply underlines the fact that peacemaking is an activity producing true outward peace. James himself is portrayed as a peacemaker in Acts 5 and 21, but his teaching does not come from personal preference, but from Jesus, who said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." That is the righteous ones who belong to God. Conflict and combat will not produce justice. The way to justice is peace. Indeed, true peace in the community will be the result of doing justice to everyone. Earlier, James listed peace-loving as the fruit of heavenly wisdom. Peacemaking is putting peace-loving into action. James is always concerned that belief finds its way into the lifestyle. True evangelical faith cannot lie sleeping, for it clothes the naked, it comforts the sorrowful, it gives the hungry food, and it shelters the destitute. Wisdom is a practice. Wisdom is someone who brings peace in situations they are in. This is a lot to take in. How can we possibly achieve this? James' directives are not just his ideas, they do come straight from Jesus and Jesus' call on each of our lives to take up our cross and follow him daily. It's why we need to be spending time each day with him, listening, praying for his Spirit to work in us and through us, to be his hands and feet and voice in our communities, our workplaces, in school, and in our families. It was the only way that I was able to overcome my anger issues as a child, or to hear his voice when he called me into ministry. And I'm sure you have similar stories. It's an ongoing practice. It's not a one and done kind of relationship. The words from James should move us and challenge us. Let's read this together. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. May it be so for each of us individually and as the church, to the glory of God.